He also lives in my hometown, Pikeville, Kentucky. Population 8,500 minus me.
Well, I hope you don't mind. Ain't a can't seem to stop. Love to get the girls around to the music coming over too fast. When my money's all gone, tell it home. Singing, hey, daddy, mama, daddy, come on. Well, now I'm living wild and dangerously, but I've got plenty of company. The moon comes up and the sun goes down, so I can't wait to put the lights down. Damn, I hope you don't mind, but ain't a can't seem to stop. Love to give the girls the world, to the music coming over too fast. When the money's all gone, tell it home. Sing, hey, daddy, mama, daddy, come home. Well, now a pretty little girl in a jug of wine, that's what it takes to make a honky-tonk kind. Jukebox moaning those honky-tonk sounds, I can't wait to leave my money down. Cause I'm a honky-tonk man, and it makes me cry. Love to give the girl the world, till the music coming up too fast. When the money's all gone, tell it home. Sing, hey, hey, mama, daddy, come home. I'm a honky-tonk man, and I can't seem to stop. Love to give the girl the world, till the music coming up too fast. When the money's all gone, tell it home. Sing, hey, daddy, mama, daddy, come home.
Grandpa, I hope you don't think I'm too young to marry your daughter.
Oh, don't worry, my boy. After you marry her, you'll age fast enough.
Hey, Dwight, I hear you bought a used car. Dwight, right here. We'll do this one again. Dwight, I hear you bought a used car, right? Why are you looking at me like that?
I don't know.
Dwight, I hear you bought a used car right here in Cornfield County.
Yeah, I did.
Well, what kind did you get?
I got a roll.
Oh, a Rolls Royce.
No, a rolls. All it does is roll down here.
Right? I hear you sung in some of the roughest honky-tonks in the country.
I guess that's right, Lulu.
Well, you know what? How about you singing over at my diner tonight, okay?
Oh, that's way too tough for me, Lulu.
Well, our crowd ain't that tough.
I'm not talking about the crowd, Lulu. I'm talking about the...
Next, we travel to the heart of the Golden State as we tour the streets of our number 9 city song. Your hosts, Dwight and Buck.
Dwight Yoakam, he's way too cool for any of that. To take his mind off his troubles, he only needs 3 things.
Guitars, Cadillacs, hillbilly music.
Guitars and Cadillacs changed my life.
That song, has to do with a lot of hurt and heartache and, being taught lessons.
And that song was totally unique. No one was doing that kind of raw, hardcore.
It's the only thing that keeps me hanging on.
Dangerous hips in country music since Elvis Presley.
A lethal combination of style, mystery, and skin-tight jeans.
I asked him one time how he gets those pants on and off.
Guitars, Cadillacs,
His hardcore honky-tonk was once rejected as too country for country.
We got fired from every club we played.
So he took refuge in the West Coast cowpunk scene.
It was loud, proud, and reckless, you know?
And emerged not only as one of country music's most influential singers, but one of its most eligible bachelors as well.
I had no idea that his sex appeal would hit me over the head like a sledgehammer. I said, "Bob, that man in that cowboy hat, and he's mine."
A revealing look at the very private life and colorful career of Dwight Yoakam on CMT Inside Fame. Dwight Yoakam is, and always has been, pure, unapologetic honky-tonk. The sexy, tight-jeaned, brooding poster boy for twangy, hardcore country music. In the mid-'80s, he spawned a whole new generation of country music fans with his hip-swiveling revival of the 60s Bakersfield sound made famous by his hero, Buck Owens.
I personally think that the country music industry owes a huge debt of gratitude to Dwight Yoakam because he was the first artist to really make country music hip.
He was the only guy at that point saying traditional country music is cool.
Not content with only one creative outlet, he forged a second career rivaling his music success in acclaim and accolades, that of bona fide Hollywood movie star.
He now boasts a resume that would make most Hollywood actors envious. He has almost 20 movies under his belt.
This is a man who is a multimedia figure now. I mean, after Sling Blade and these films he has done, he's not just this tight jean cowboy hatted singer. He's a respected actor.
At times defiant and always uncompromising, Dwight cut his own independent path to success in music and movies on his own terms.
He's always had kind of a rebellious streak, and he's been one to go against the grain a bit and not to follow the rules.
Dwight is one of those people that, if I must say so myself, does things a little differently and has always danced to a different beat. Well, you know, he's got two personas. First of all, it's that really sexy lone hero thing on stage with the little hips twisting. And then in the movies, often, you know, he plays the really dark bad guy. Both of them are an act. You know, one is on stage, one is on camera. So, you know, the real Dwight is somewhere else.
The real Dwight David Yoakam was born October 23, 1956 in Pikeville, Kentucky, the eldest of 3 children born to parents David and Ruth Ann. Theirs was a humble, devoutly religious family, grounded in traditional values and wholesome ideals.
I had the great fortune of being parented by 2 of the most decent people I've ever had the pleasure of knowing, and probably will ever have a pleasure of knowing.
They're the kind of people that will do anything for you, will give you anything.
When Dwight was a year old, the family moved from the Appalachian Hills of southeast Kentucky to the upper Midwest, settling in Columbus, Ohio. There, Dwight's father ran a filling station, and his mother worked as an office secretary to support their growing family. However, the Yoakams, like many other families who had migrated north, continued to regard Kentucky as home.
Friday they went home. Where was home? Back down to Kentucky and West Virginia. They'd come back to school on Monday, but they went home because Columbus was not their home.
Even though I spent the majority of my childhood in Ohio, southeast Kentucky, Floyd County, Betsy Lane was home.
Dwight's frequent trips with his family to Kentucky connected Dwight to a musical heritage that profoundly impacted him. The rustic backwoods and country music that came from the area seemed to give him an identity, a feeling of belonging to a place and a culture.
I had a kind of a birthright to the mountain music that I would hear when we would drive down into Kentucky. It was the family's music I was hearing on the radio there, the bluegrass music, the mountain music that I was hearing.
Dwight grew up with another major influence that asserted itself whether he was in Kentucky or Ohio, the church. The Yoakam family was in church every time its doors were open.
We were in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday evening. I was raised in the Church of Christ. And any time in between that it was determined that we should all be there. And that had a profound impact on my life.
The church also provided Dwight with a significant musical influence. He loved the old-time gospel hymns that were sung a cappella in the Church of Christ.
It was obvious to me that early country music was what he listened to, and church music.
In my own writing, I notice, well, I'm aware of the influence of those hymns.
As Dwight moved into his teenage years, his musical interests expanded. By the late 60s, he was listening to a mixture of rock, country, and R&B, ranging from the Supremes and Johnny Horton to Buck Owens and the Beatles, a far cry from the mountain music of Appalachia or the time-honored hymns he was singing in church.
Oh, there was a veritable, sort of say, melting pot cauldron of that devil's music that was going on out there.
When Dwight entered high school in 1970, he had already determined that he wanted to pursue music as a goal. However, he found himself also drawn to another avenue of creative expression, acting. Dwight became a regular in school plays, often winning the lead role. He seemed to be blessed with an innate ability to perform in front of an audience.
Dwight, in high school, had this uncanny ability to know what he could do and what he couldn't do with an audience. And many times I would sit in the back of the auditorium and say, where did he learn that?
Dwight's skill on stage and his ease in front of an audience was all the more remarkable since he was known by all as a very shy and reserved student. Many of Dwight's teachers were amazed at his theatrical side.
One of them said to me, they'd had me in an English course the previous year, I think my 8th grade year, and they said, I didn't know you could speak. So I guess I was shy.
He was an excellent student in theater, and to be honest with you, I always thought he was a better actor than he was a singer in high school.
It was as a singer, however, that Dwight made his mark in high school. He put together a band known as Dwight and the Greasers. With Dwight on lead vocals, the band whipped up young female excitement wherever they played, and Dwight seemed to lose all his shyness.
He got right down on the floor and was singing to these girls in the front row, and it was, you know, you got the impression that this was some, well, sex symbol that was, you know, doing this, and it was charged.
His mom said that girls would be waiting in the trees at their house, and like even when he was just in a high school band, he had just girls swooning.
Dwight continued to mesmerize the teenage girls of Northland High until he graduated in 1974. He continued to front a rockabilly band and at the same time enrolled in Ohio State University studying philosophy and history. After 2 years of sporadic attendance at Ohio State and a musical career that was stalled, Dwight headed for Nashville in 1976, looking for work as a performer at Opryland Theme Park. After 2 months in Nashville, he decided to go to California to check out the music scene there. To his surprise, when he arrived in Los Angeles, he had found his true home.
The culture here was just something that, although it was completely foreign to what I was born into and raised around, you know, the Ohio Valley, I mean, it seemed like it was always meant to be for me.
Unlike Nashville, California seemed ripe with creative outlets. He began singing in area honky-tonks, writing songs, and putting together a band. Needing a day job to support his musical pursuits, Dwight drove a truck around L.A. delivering furniture.
He was a furniture mover and lived in an apartment that had very little furniture in it and ate cheese and crackers, I think, you know.
For 5 years, Dwight struggled to make a name for himself in California. He continued to write songs, play with various bands, and hone his vision of country music. However, by 1982, he seemed no closer to his goal than when he had arrived. Constantly struggling to make ends meet, he was now 26 years old with no real prospects in sight, but things were about to start looking up. Coming, and later, Dwight becomes a reluctant sex symbol.
He was named Man of the Year by the Australian Gay Cowboy Club.
When CMT Inside fame continued. In 1977, 21-year-old Dwight Yoakam arrived in Los Angeles, California from Columbus, Ohio, by way of a brief and unsuccessful stop in Nashville, determined to break into the world of country music. He was dedicated to an artistic vision of traditional country music that embraced a raw honky-tonk sound with a rock and roll style. However, after 5 years of playing bars and clubs in the LA music scene, he was no closer to his goal.
I was really learning and evolving into myself. That's what was going on those 5 years. I was trying to pay rent, not living large, but living a lot.
In 1982, Dwight met Pete Anderson, a 35-year-old guitar player from Detroit. At the insistence of a friend, Dwight dropped in at a local club where Pete was performing.
He came and sat in and played a couple of Merle songs, and I played guitar and knew the right intros, and I guess he was moderately impressed with that.
I played 3 things with him and immediately had an affinity to Pete. I mean, he knew what I was doing, I knew what he was doing. We played it together that way.
They both recognized the chemistry immediately. Excited by the possibilities, they formed a band named Dwight Yoakam and the Kentucky Bourbon. Pete's distinctive guitar licks combined with Dwight's voice and lyrics for an instantly recognizable signature sound.
They seem to complement each other. It's the yin and yang thing. I mean, they both bring to the table, I think, what the other maybe doesn't have.
I had a heavy blues background sliding into country. He had a heavy country background with some bluegrass, and it's bluegrass country, blues country collision.
Right time, right place, I think, for both of us. It was just that kind of predestined, bit of fate.
Dwight and Pete started to play at small country venues in and around L.A., anxious to share their music. But they insisted on playing only Dwight's original material, not top 40 country songs. And they lost more jobs than they got.
We got fired from every club we played. And we never finished an engagement. If it was 2 nights, we played 1. If it was 4 nights, we played 2. I think we never did 1 night, because if we did 1, they might have stopped us after 2 sets and said, stop.
Due to the overwhelming commercial failure of what we were attempting, I found myself without a place to live for a couple of months.
Losing jobs as quickly as they found them, Dwight was facing sleeping in his car in a friend's driveway. Pete, feeling badly that his new partner would be sleeping in his car, offered Dwight his tiny laundry room as an alternative.
He came over, he had a sleeping bag, and it was so small that you had to close the door and then lay down. Like if I was to go to see if he was awake and open the door, I would hit him in the head. So it was very small, this little room. And I was in the living room on a piece of foam and a blanket. And that's sort of how we survived as musicians.
As cliche as it sounds, the irony is that the darkest hour sometimes is just before the dawn.
Oddly enough, the light peeking over the horizon came in the form of LA's burgeoning punk rock scene. Since they could no longer get themselves booked into regular country venues that wanted top 40 cover bands, they began to play in what were becoming known as cowpunk bars. Cowpunk was a loud, in-your-face form of alternative country, a hybrid of twangy country and rockabilly. Dwight and the Kentucky Bourbon fit right in.
We combined what was our aggressive nature, which could be misconstrued as youthful exuberance, with great songs and a great singer and excellent musicians. We were a pretty overpowering band.
We came on doing it as wildly and recklessly as any bluegrass band in 1944 would have been doing it, It was loud, proud, and reckless,
Dwight and the Kentucky Bourbon began to create a buzz around L.A. Fans began spreading the word. One of the people who was encouraged to go see Dwight was Manuel, famous clothing designer to the stars. Impressed with Dwight's charisma, Manuel passed Dwight's name on to an agent at the famous Halsey booking agency in Tulsa. The name struck a chord with Sherman Halsey, son of the agency's owner. He remembered a demo tape he had received years before from Dwight. Soon, Sherman, who had just moved to L.A., was on his way to see the new, improved Dwight Yoakam.
I walk into this club, and here's this guy playing absolutely the most traditional country sounds in the world at that point. But the entire crowd is like a complete punk crowd seeing him. There's like spike hair over here, and then a guy that's 65 years old from Oklahoma sitting next to that guy. And everybody loved it.
In 1984, Sherman called me on the phone. He had moved out here, and he said, "You know what? I think if you'll let me manage you, my dad and I think I can get you a record deal."
With Sherman on board, Dwight and the Kentucky Bourbon began touring with punk and rock bands like X, Los Lobos, and the Blasters. Sherman saw in Dwight not only potential for a record deal, but the opportunity to shape a new star in the emerging world of music videos.
Dwight was a really visual act. I mean, he looked like James Dean in a cowboy hat. He was really thin. He had a great sense of style.
To develop the image, Dwight knew he needed to upgrade from the red checkered store-bought shirts and cheap boots he had worn since arriving in L.A. He called on the man who had been instrumental in the fashion images of Elvis, the Beatles, and Keith Richards, among others. Manuel. Manuel came up with the perfect look.
We tightened up the pants, created a little jacket.
Manuel got it instantly, you know, and started making him sort of the classic stuff, which was different than he was making for other acts at that time.
Dwight took his new look in music back to Nashville in search of a record deal. But Music Row was unimpressed with Dwight's hardcore traditional country music. They were more interested in the smoother, more vanilla sounds of mainstream pop.
Country music was slicker then, it was more orchestrated. They had really gone beyond the cowboy hat image of the years before, and it was more of a Las Vegas sort of style, and Dwight was going back to more of a straight traditional country sound.
People just said, oh, that's all hillbilly music, and dismissed it in a way.
Unable to get a major label to record and market his brand of music, Dwight decided to take matters into his own hands and cut his own record. He scraped enough money together to record an extended play EP, and in November of 1984, released Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc. The 6-song EP captured the Dwight Yoakam sound and the attention of music critics from coast to coast.
We were getting a lot of really hard to get, very cool press. You know, we'd get like the Los Angeles Times or the New York, papers that normally wouldn't write positive stuff about country music. They were loving this EP.
In 1985, Dwight's EP found its way onto the desk of Paige Levy, an executive at Warner Brothers Records. Paige heard something special.
It was so country that it was almost foreign to me. And so I had to listen several times, and the more I listened to it, I thought, you know what? This is really cool. This is the real deal.
Paige immediately arranged to meet with Dwight in Austin, where he was touring with the Blasters. One show was all it took for Paige to be convinced she had found country's next superstar.
Dwight did a show, and it's just amazing. I mean, I understood then why the non-country fans like seeing Dwight, because he's very aggressive. I mean, they play like a rock band, but it was definitely country.
Not very many people seemed to get it at that point, but Paige was somebody that really got it and was a champion of Dwight, and going in and telling the label, this is something that's new and cutting edge.
To me, it was a no-brainer. This guy was going to be a big star.
In 1985, Warner Brothers announced the addition of Dwight Yoakam to its Reprise label. Dwight was about to find out if his 9 long years of struggle were going to pay off or just fade away like a million other California dreams.
Vindicated and flabbergasted all at the same time.
And later, Dwight takes a gamble on a pet film and nearly loses everything.
Probably the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life.
By 1982, Dwight Yoakam had already struggled for 5 years as an unknown Los Angeles singer when he met guitarist Pete Anderson. The instant rapport between the two, both personally and musically, gave rise to a hard-edged hybrid of traditional honky-tonk and West Coast rockabilly. After years of rejection by the country music establishment, they parlayed success in the alternative rock and cowpunk clubs of California into a record deal with Reprise Records in Nashville.
I'm a honky-tonk man.
Honky Tonk Man was a brilliant remake of a Johnny Horton tune originally recorded in 1956, the year Dwight was born. Dwight's version was an instant hit and would forever be his trademark song.
It kind of became a summation of the sound, the life we'd all been living in those joints and honky-tonks all over Southern California.
He had his look together, he had his sound together, he had an original thing going. And I knew in the bottom of my heart, he was the guy to carry the flag at that moment.
I just think the phrase, a honky-tonk man, sealed the image of Dwight. I mean, that became his trademark song.
With the single Honky Tonk Man climbing the charts, Reprise Records released Dwight's debut album, Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc., on March 3rd, 1986. The album was a huge critical and commercial success, selling more than 1 million copies, reaching #1 on the country charts, and crossing over to Billboard's pop album chart as well. For the 30-year-old country boy from Pikeville, long, frustrating years of rejection and struggle were finally over. The taste of success was long awaited, and sweet.
It was a long time coming, and by the time it got here, the road was so smooth. It was just, I'm glad it was over. It was, it's hard to talk about. Sorry.
I was elated, vindicated, and flabbergasted all at the same time.
For years, Nashville had branded Dwight too country for country, yet his appeal now extended well beyond country. National media outlets clamored to get the scoop on this country phenomenon, and Dwight couldn't wait to express his opinions about Nashville's Music Row. He singled out artists he thought were killing the genre, and was vocal about his dislike of the direction Nashville was taking.
Dwight was doing a lot of interviews and was saying things specifically about other artists on the radio, good, bad, or otherwise.
There was a panel that Dwight was on and supposedly said something called radio a bunch of mercenaries. And, you know, Dwight swore he didn't say that.
I was guilty of continuing to be less than selective about my candor and about, you know, the state of country music as a business.
Dwight's candor quickly got him in trouble with the Nashville establishment and country radio.
I would see people on the road or run into friends or people, and they'd say, "Are you the one that signed Dwight Yoakam?" And I wouldn't know what to say. I'd say, "Yes," and they'd either say, "Wow, that is so cool that you took a chance with an artist like that," or "You're the one that allowed that guy to make records and say what he's saying on country radio."
Dwight's not going to kiss anybody's ass. And so that got him in a little trouble from time to time, but you know what? His music was good enough, and hopefully still good music wins out.
Apparently his music was good enough. In 1987, when Dwight released his second reprise album, Hillbilly Deluxe, radio and Nashville couldn't deny him.
Little sister, don't you? Little sister, don't you?
Dwight Yoakam was hotter than ever, and his powerful stage presence was a strong part of his appeal. Fans went wild over Dwight's skin-tight jeans, hat brim pulled down low, and raw sexual energy.
I asked him one time how he gets those pants on and off. I wonder if there's a seamstress back there that sews them on. I don't mind looking at them. No big deal.
It's the whole thing. It's his voice, it's those songs, it's the hips. I think he has the most dangerous hips in country music since Elvis Presley.
In a December poll, Playgirl magazine named Dwight Yoakam one of the 10 sexiest men in the United States. The distinction would be one of many that demonstrated his widespread sex appeal.
I think I called him personally to let him know about this one, was that he was named Man of the Year by the Australian Gay Cowboy Club.
You hope people like you. But it's a bit off-putting and shocking when they do, in mass.
We've never let him forget about that one.
After the release of Hillbilly Deluxe, Dwight toured with Naomi and Winona, the Judds. 23-year-old Winona was as charmed as the rest of the country by Dwight.
I said, "Bob, that man in that cowboy hat, and he's mine."
He dated Winona when we were first on the road. And he was opening for us, and we were touring together, and there was a little romantic thing going on.
We shared, I think, common bonds in some ways, and again felt a bit of sanctuary with each other, probably. But our lives were, you know, full of highways and itineraries that weren't always, you know, conducive to, you know, pursuing that relationship together.
I don't know how he gets in those pants. I know all you women out there have wondered the same thing. Well, I've seen it. Let's just say they're kind of hard to put on. He has to kind of, he has a whole little maneuver thing going on.
The Dwight Yoakam juggernaut picked up even more momentum in 1989 with the release of his third album, Buenas Noches from a Lonely Room. Dwight had already grabbed a hatful of top 10 songs, but he'd never earned a #1. when he persuaded his hero, Buck Owens, to come out of retirement and record a duet with him, he got his first #1.
I was a Dwight Yoakam fan right from the very beginning. I saw him, he reminded me of Bill in a lot of ways.
Dwight continued to be the darling of the critics with his fourth album, If There Was a Way, released in 1990. Rolling Stone magazine named it one of the top 5 country albums of the decade. Dwight also achieved Hollywood notoriety in 1992 when he appeared at the Oscars with sexy film star Sharon Stone on his arm. Miss Stone had just been catapulted to worldwide celebrity for her provocative role in the movie Basic Instinct.
We'd actually been dating about 4 or 5 weeks. We'd met on a commercial shoot, and we went out.
We did get a spike in sales when he was dating Sharon Stone. I called him up and I'm going, dude, keep dating her. And he's like going, I can't. It's really weird. I can't keep going. I said, dude, just a couple more weeks. We're selling records.
The relationship was brief, ending with Sharon's much publicized description of Dwight as worse than a dirt sandwich. Dwight has never responded publicly to the comment, preferring to attribute it to the strain of Stone's instant international celebrity status.
It can be very high altitude kind of flight, you know.
He's always been very low key about his relationships, and I think that's wise on his part. Because once the media comes in, it becomes a feeding frenzy. Look at the big stink made over the little dirt sandwich comment Sharon Stone made.
Despite the distractions of Hollywood, Dwight Yoakam was as focused as ever on his music. In 1993, he released his 5th album, This Time. Critics hailed it as his most brilliant work to date. It would also prove to be his most commercially successful album, quickly moving into multi-platinum status. Ain't That Lonely Yet won Dwight his first Grammy.
When Dwight won the Grammy, it was, you could see that twinkle in his eye. It was definitely the vindication he needed. I think he felt that he finally realized, felt the acceptance from all the different formats. So he was very excited about that.
I felt a little bit like, I guess, that the music really finally caught up to everybody. Or everybody caught up to that music, you know, at that moment.
Dwight Yoakam had become a household name, his popularity crossing boundaries of age, class, and musical genres.
He was everywhere. I mean, Mr. Marketing Genius. He was on all the talk shows, and his videos were being...
You know, leprechaun twinkle in her eye, and one of the most brilliant, vivacious, sexy women I'd ever met.
I mean, I knew who he was and loved his music, but I had no idea that his sex appeal would hit me over the head like a sledgehammer.
Dwight and Duff soon became inseparable. Life for Dwight Yoakam seemed to be a fairy tale. He had everything: fame, fortune, artistic fulfillment, and now a blossoming relationship. But Dwight was about to take a detour, one that would change his life forever. Coming up, Dwight's preoccupation with acting causes concerns.
You know how many times I've heard that from an artist as soon as they sell 3 records? Well, you know, I really want to make movies is what I want to do.
And later, after 17 years, Dwight says a painful goodbye to his record label.
He just felt it was time, you know, they don't get what I'm doing anymore as much, and it was time to go.
The 5-year period from 1988 to 1993 saw Dwight Yoakam attain superstar status in American music. With 5 straight critically acclaimed, commercially successful albums and a high-profile sex symbol image, he had become a household name. When he chose to take time off from his music career in 1993 to pursue acting, his record company, Warner Reprise, was concerned.
I was sure to tell him, Dwight, just don't forget what got you here, okay? Remember, it's country music. It's your fans out there from Kentucky to Seattle to New York, and they want you to keep making great records.
Dwight, however, was clearly energized by the acting experience. He was also branching out into developing, directing, and editing his own music videos. Dwight was becoming a true Renaissance man.
I think he liked the process. I think he saw it as another way to express his art, because he's an artist.
Okay, remember, it's country music. It's your fans out there from Kentucky to Seattle to New York, and they want you to keep making great records.
Dwight, however, was clearly energized by the acting experience. He was also branching out into developing, directing, and editing his own music videos. Dwight was becoming a true Renaissance man.
I think he liked the process. I think he saw it as another way to express his art, because he's an artist.
At times, though, his artistic license got out of hand for conservative Nashville. The music video for Dwight's single, Takes a Lot to Rock You, was deemed too controversial for air on CMT and TNN, the primary outlets at the time for country music videos.
He turns in this video, and we give it to CMT, and they have a real problem with it. And, you know, the fact that it has a man in drag and a lot of men in bondage, I don't understand why they wouldn't play it.
Another video, Little Sister, featured female go-go dancers in cages. Some fans interpreted the images as sexist.
Well, I mean, it raised a lot of eyebrows. I caught a lot of flack over that from a lot of people.
Even on the Conservative Country Music Association Awards show, Dwight pushed the envelope of what he considered country. In 1995, Dwight began work on two projects. The first was an independent film written and directed by Billy Bob Thornton called Sling Blade. Dwight played the role of Doyle Hargraves, a mean-spirited, abusive construction worker.
Well, when we saw that movie, it was like, oh my gosh, Dwight. I mean, he just nailed that character. What a jerk.
Someone was asking me one day, they said, what's that like, you know, hanging out with him after you've seen him in these roles like that? And I said, well, I'm just not going to make him mad, that's all.
It was interesting that when the credits rolled, I could hear people around me going, I didn't know that was Dwight Yoakam. Look at that. That was Dwight Yoakam that played that guy.
He knows how to play these dark, kind of, squirrely guys that you would probably see if you were looking down death row or some prison anywhere in America.
The independent film was an unexpected critical success, winning a coveted Academy Award for Best Screenplay.
After that, I think his acting ability was never questioned again. He was seen as Dwight Yoakam the actor, not Dwight Yoakam the country singer.
All of a sudden, he is even more of a household name, and that opportunity created other opportunities, and all of a sudden, Dwight's getting all these calls regarding acting, and, you know, I was still a little voice back there going, don't forget what got you here.
The second project that Dwight had begun in 1995 was a new album. In October '95, Reprise released Gone in follow-up to Dwight's previous triple platinum, This Time. In contrast to the resounding success of Sling Blade, the response to the album from the label, from radio, and from the record-buying public was lukewarm at best.
The Gone album was really great artistic expression, as they say, but unfortunately didn't have really anything on it that was a commercial success.
The songwriting, I thought, was really good on the next record after This Time, but it was a very much a disappointment in the sales.
Dwight's music career and his film career were moving in opposite directions. As far as the label was concerned, Dwight's divided energies were to blame.
You always play the radio game, the politically correct, going to the right places, talking to the right people. And Dwight simply didn't have time to do that anymore.
I think he can do the film, and I think he can do the music. I don't think he can do both at the same time. And I think that's where the rub is, that it's trying to serve two masters, and it's very difficult.
I don't think we've recovered from that, from going triple platinum to 360,000 units. It was pretty devastating.
Other changes were also occurring in Dwight's life. His 3-year relationship with model Karen Duffy was coming to an end. The demands and separation of two high-profile careers finally took its toll.
Dwight and I had so much fun together, but he lives in LA and I live in New York, and so it was a perfect dating relationship. But I think when you get a die-hard New Yorker and someone who loves LA, it can be great for a few years, but then when it comes to the point where you're just like, well, you know what, I think neither one of us is too eager to move, no matter how much you like the other person.
I guess that what you realize is that your journey in life as much as you love somebody else is not maybe always going to parallel their journey in life.
While the romantic love affair between Dwight and Duff had come to an end, a tender, committed friendship endured.
I'll always have a huge, love in my heart for Duff.
The women that he's dated really, really love him. I mean, and that's, you know, no matter how things end, I think it's very nice that he still has great relationships with all the women that he's dated.
Free from emotional commitment, Dwight's dual career continued as he starred in the movie The Newton Boys in 1998, for which he again received critical raves. But the occasional hit would not slow down the inexorable pull that Dwight felt from his film career. He met and began dating actress Bridget Fonda, daughter of old friend Peter Fonda, and soon found himself committed to a film that he, Bridget, and Peter would star in called South of Heaven, West of Hell. Acting as producer, director, and screenwriter, he would also score the film's soundtrack. The artistic labor of love began with high hopes, only to head south like its title. Only a few days into filming, the financial backing for the film pulled out. The entire project turned into a nightmare.
To get out on a location and have the financing fall through. I mean, this happens in the film business. You know, you can dream up the worst horror scenario in the world. It's going to happen in the film business. And this one, although he wasn't the first to have this happen, it's still devastating.
We continued with, you know, loans and bailouts and kind of crawled along and got through the 26 days of shooting and got off the set and came back here. Still pretty crippled up from the experience.
Whether it was the right thing to do or wrong thing to do, he didn't care. He said he would do it, and he did it.
Ultimately, Dwight's production company filed Chapter 11, but not before the project disintegrated into a tangled web of lawsuits and finger-pointing. To add insult to injury, the movie failed to generate any distribution or ticket sales.
It's the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life on a variety of levels, you know, almost all levels.
Dwight Yoakam started the decade of the 90s in the middle of a dream come true. He ended the decade in the middle of the worst nightmare of his life. His future in music and his future in film were now both in jeopardy. Coming up, radio turns a deaf ear to Dwight Yoakam.
People aren't calling, demanding to hear the Dwight Yoakam.
Dwight Yoakam's ride through the 90s had been a roller coaster. His West Coast update of hardcore twang had been accepted and embraced by America, and he himself had been hailed as a worthy successor to the mantle of Buck Owens. His acting career had taken off with a powerful role in the movie Sling Blade, starring Billy Bob Thornton. But the end of the decade had brought declining music sales and a devastating financial loss from an independent film, written, directed, and starred in by Dwight. In 2000, when Dwight released Tomorrow Sounds Today, it too failed to generate excitement.
He still had a lot of fans out there at country radio that played the singles we put out, but again, they just called and said, hey, we're sorry, we're not getting phones. People aren't calling, demanding to hear the Dwight Yoakam record. So we sort of felt like the writing was on the wall.
In April of 2002, after 17 years of platinum success, Dwight Yoakam and Warner Reprise parted ways.
There was kind of a feeling of the cycle having run its course. You know, I mean, our deal was completed. We fulfilled our obligation to Warner's in terms of delivering records.
He just felt it was time, you know, they don't get what I'm doing anymore as much, and it was time to go.
In 2002, after 4 years together, Dwight and actress Bridget Fonda also parted ways.
And you know, just wish nothing but happiness for her.
But for all the changes and losses of the recent past, Dwight is rightly optimistic. In 2002, he started his own record label, Electrodisc Records.
It just seemed like the right thing to do at the right time, you know. I mean, it's still all about the music.
I'm the sole artist on the roster at this point, and probably that's in the best interest of everybody involved. I can maintain my focus on me.
Dwight's acting career is as strong as ever. Dwight won solid reviews for terrorizing Jodie Foster in the film Panic Room. And in 2003, he wrapped filming of Hollywood Homicide, in which he co-starred with Harrison Ford.
Hopefully I'll be able to have the opportunity to continue acting, because I really enjoy acting. And given the right circumstance, I may direct again. And That's not a threat, that's a promise.
Dwight Yoakam's place is already secure in country music's heritage, regardless of the future. He has fashioned a unique niche for himself as one of the premier singer-songwriters of the modern era.
I truly admire Dwight. He is absolutely an American essential, American music essential, and a total original. He has my utmost respect.
And there's nobody like him. Nobody sounds like him. He's an acquired taste. I mean, you either love him or you don't. And I think that all these years that he's made records, he's been true to himself.
You look at Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson, any of those people, they were cool. They were cool. They were rebels. They smoked, they drank. Who knows what they did? But they were real. And I find that Dwight is one of the only artists today that is still that.
I would just hope that I'm remembered fondly, and I brought pleasure through what I did musically to people, and I brought the same, even a modicum of the kind of pleasure that I derived from my musical inspirations to other people.
He's still Dwight Yoakam, and there's only one, you know, there's only one.